One minute you're 32, blissfully married to the love of your life, sketching out blueprints for a future filled with picket fences and chubby-cheeked toddlers. The next, you're a widow, staring at a catalogue of urns because your husband's car was so mangled in the accident that the funeral director gently advised against an open casket. That became my reality 6 months ago. My husband, Ethan Mull, was gone, and I, Chloe, was left behind to navigate the wreckage. The initial weeks were a suffocating fog of sympathy casseroles I couldn't eat, well-meaning phone calls I couldn't bear to answer, and nights spent staring at the ceiling, the silence in our bed screaming louder than any sound I'd ever heard. If it hadn't been for my parents, Frank and Helena, stepping in to manage the funeral, I might have simply dissolved into the floral patterned wallpaper of our master bedroom. "Chloe, honey, we've handled everything with the funeral home," my mom had murmured, her voice uncharacteristically soft, her hand resting on my shoulder. "You just take care of yourself." My lifeline became a support group that met in the sterile basement of a community church. Every Tuesday evening, I'd sit in a circle of folding chairs with strangers who weren't strangers at all. They were the only people on earth who understood the cavernous hole where my heart used to be. Some days are just heavier than others, I admitted during one session, my voice a fragile thread. Sometimes I wake up, and for just a second, I forget he's not there, and then the weight of it all just crashes down again. Linda Iris, a kind-faced woman whose husband had lost a battle with cancer 2 years prior, reached across the circle and gave my hand a firm squeeze. "That's the grief, sweetie," she said, her eyes full of a wisdom I never wanted. "It comes in waves. You just have to learn to ride them." As the seasons began to turn, I waded into the practicalities. Ethan had been a meticulous planner. He'd left me our beautiful 2-story colonial in a quiet North Carolina suburb, a sleek condo in uptown Charlotte, and a financial portfolio that meant I'd never have to work again. But the thought of being alone in that big silent house, with nothing but memories for company, was a special kind of terror. I went back to my job at the marketing firm, switching to a part-time schedule. The routine, the deadlines, the mindless chatter about campaign metrics, it was a shield against the silence. The most profound shift, however, was in my relationship with my parents. Growing up, I was the sensible, academic older sister, forever eclipsed by my vibrant, dramatic younger sister Jessica. They never missed one of Jess's dance recitals or soccer games, while my honor roll certificates were met with a distracted, "That's nice, dear." But after Ethan's death, it was like a switch had been flipped. Suddenly, they saw me. When they mentioned they were feeling a financial pinch and asked if I could help out, I set up a monthly transfer of $1,500 without a second thought. The weekly dinners at their house became my sanctuary. Mom would make her legendary pot roast, Dad would pour a generous glass of Cabernet, and we'd talk. For the first time, they seemed genuinely interested in my life. "Chloe, tell us about that new project you're leading," Dad would ask, leaning forward, his eyes focused on me. "The campaign is going really well," I'd say, savoring the novel feeling of their undivided attention. "My boss thinks we might land several new national clients." In those moments, I felt a fragile sense of connection I'd craved my entire life. That fragile peace shattered the night Jessica showed up for dinner. She swept in, 7 months pregnant and glowing, her presence sucking all the air out of the room as it always did. She'd been living in some trendy, overpriced apartment across town, and I hadn't laid eyes on her since the funeral, where she'd seemed distant and uncomfortable. "Jessie, sweetie, come sit right here," Mom cooed, practically shoving me down the bench to make room for her golden child. "Do you need a pillow for your back? Are your ankles swollen?" And just like that, I was invisible again. It was like watching a spell be cast, their attention instantly and completely captured by Jessica and her burgeoning belly. The familiar, bitter ache of being the runner-up settled back into my chest, a ghost I had foolishly believed was gone for good. "So who's the father?" I asked later, trying to wedge myself back into the conversation. "Have you told him?" Jessica's face clouded over. "That's my business, Chloe," she snapped, aggressively pushing peas around her plate. "I don't feel the need to broadcast every detail of my personal life." Mom leaped to her defense. "Karen, don't be nosy. Your sister will share when she's ready." The hypocrisy was staggering. When Ethan and I were going through years of grueling fertility treatments, my parents had demanded constant, invasive updates, offering a stream of unsolicited and often hurtful advice. My personal life had been their favorite topic of discussion. A few weeks later, I tried again. "How are you going to manage on your own?" I pressed, watching her pile a second helping of mashed potatoes onto her plate. "Babies are a lot." Jessica waved a dismissive hand, a smug, mysterious smile playing on her lips. "Don't you worry about my baby," she said, her tone dripping with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. "We won't need anything from anyone. I've got it all handled." I should have recognized that smile. It was the same one she wore before launching her 2-week-long organic smoothie venture, the one she had when she was studying for a life coaching certification she never completed, the same one she flashed right before losing 3 months' rent on a cryptocurrency tip from a guy she met at a bar. "Trust me," she said, patting her stomach with a theatrical flourish that should have sent alarm bells ringing. "This time, everything is going to work out perfectly." Dad beamed at her, as if she'd just announced she'd brokered world peace. "That's my girl," he boomed, always landing on her feet. I chewed my pot roast, the familiar taste turning to ash in my mouth. I was just the reliable backup, the family ATM, while Jessica was the star of the show. Some things, I thought grimly, never change. The call from Jessica came on a Tuesday morning, right as I was trying to decipher a dense analytics report. Her name flashed on my screen, and I nearly sent it to voicemail. Our conversations were usually stilted and brief, but some instinct made me answer. "Chloe," her voice was syrupy sweet, a tone she reserved exclusively for when she wanted something. "I'm having my baby shower next weekend, at Mom and Dad's. I would really love it if you could be there." The invitation was so out of left field, it stunned me into silence. "Are you sure?" I asked, the surprise evident in my voice. We hadn't had a real conversation in months. "Of course I'm sure," she laughed, though it sounded tinny and forced. "You're my only sister. It wouldn't be the same without you. Plus," she added, her voice dropping slightly, "I have a special announcement to make." A knot of unease tightened in my stomach, but I shoved it down. Maybe this was an olive branch. Maybe motherhood was changing her. "I'll be there," I promised, my mind already running through gift ideas. The following Saturday, I walked up to my parents' house carrying 2 beautifully wrapped gifts, a top-of-the-line video baby monitor and a soft hand-knitted blanket I'd spent weeks working on. Whatever our issues, this was my future niece or nephew. The house looked like a pastel grenade had gone off inside. Pink and blue balloons bobbed against the ceiling, streamers crisscrossed the living room, and a massive diaper cake stood as the centerpiece on the dining table. It was a classic Jessica production, over the top and designed for an audience. The house was packed. My Aunt Carol was there with her daughters, Mom's bridge club was gossiping on the sofa, and a gaggle of Jessica's old sorority sisters were clustered around the punch bowl. Jessica herself glided through the crowd in a flowing, ridiculously expensive maternity gown, looking radiant. But beneath the glow, there was a predatory glint in her eyes. I noticed she kept looking at me, her gaze lingering a fraction of a second too long. It was unnerving. We suffered through the gauntlet of baby shower games, guessing the baby's due date, cooing over melted chocolate bars in diapers. I, ironically, won the game of measuring Jessica's belly with a string of yarn, a victory that seemed to visibly annoy her. The whole time I felt like I was being watched, like I was a pawn in a game I didn't understand. After she had theatrically opened every last gift, she picked up my hand-knitted blanket, her fingers tracing the pattern. Then, she picked up a glass and clinked it with a spoon. The room quieted. My heart began to thud against my ribs for a reason I couldn't name. The air grew thick and heavy. "I want to thank everyone for coming and for all these wonderful gifts," she began, one hand resting possessively on her stomach. "But there's something else. There's an important person missing today, and I think it's finally time everyone knew who the father of my baby is." Her eyes locked onto mine across the crowded room. In that sickening, world-stopping instant, I knew. A cold dread washed over me. I knew what she was going to say before the words even left her lips, but that didn't stop them from hitting me like a physical blow. "The father," she announced, her voice ringing with triumph in the dead silent room, "is Ethan, my sister Chloe's late husband." The world tilted on its axis. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Aunt Carol's hand flew to her mouth. I could hear frantic whispering from the sorority sisters. But what gutted me, what truly stole the air from my lungs, was the look on my parents' faces. It wasn't shock. It was grim. Practiced resolve. They had known. This whole party was an ambush. Before I could even form a thought, Jessica's voice cut through the haze again, sharp and cruel, aimed directly at me. "And since this baby is Ethan's only child, his only heir, that means he is entitled to his father's inheritance. I'm talking about half of everything, Chloe. The house, the condo, the money. My son deserves what's his." The room started to spin. I grabbed the back of a chair to keep from falling. Then, my parents moved to stand on either side of her, a united front. "Chloe," my father said, using the same stern boardroom tone he used to discipline me as a child, "you need to do the right thing. This is your nephew. He deserves his father's legacy." My own voice felt like it was coming from a great distance, a dry, ragged rasp. "You're lying, all of you." The denial was pathetic, even to my own ears. "Oh, really?" Jessica's smile was pure poison. She held up her phone. "Then how do you explain these?" The screen showed a picture of her and Ethan, my Ethan, wrapped in each other's arms, kissing passionately in what was clearly a hotel room. Another photo showed them holding hands at a candlelit table, a restaurant I'd never seen before. "He loved me," Jessica declared, her voice soaring. "He was going to leave you. We were going to tell everyone." But then, her voice broke, and she summoned fat, crocodile tears. Then the accident happened, and our whole future was stolen. I couldn't breathe. My body went on autopilot. I grabbed my purse, my knuckles white. I pushed through the sea of shocked and pitying faces, stumbling out the front door into the blinding sunlight. I heard my mother call my name, a hollow, pleading sound, but I was already in my car, gravel spitting from my tires, as I tore out of the driveway. The drive home was a blur of tears and hyperventilation. My phone buzzed insistently the moment I walked in the door. It was Jessica, sending a relentless barrage of messages, screenshots of her texts with Ethan. "I don't love her anymore, Jess. I haven't for a long time. We'll tell her after the divorce is final. I promise. You're the only one I want. I can't wait to start our life together." Message after message, each one a fresh twist of the knife. The timestamps dated back nearly a year. A year of my husband and my sister plotting a new life behind my back while I was injecting myself with hormones, crying over negative pregnancy tests, and blaming my own body for failing us. I spent the night wandering through my house, a ghost in my own life, touching Ethan's books, his clothes, trying to reconcile the man I loved with the monster on my phone screen. Had any of it been real? The call from my parents came at 7 a.m. sharp. I let it go to voicemail twice before finally answering. "Chloe, you need to be reasonable about this," my father began, forgoing any pretense of a greeting. "The sooner you agree to split the assets, the easier this will be on everyone." The sheer, unmitigated gall of his words sent a hot surge of rage through my veins. "Easier for whom? For Jessica? For you? For all of us?" My mother chimed in, her voice thin and reedy. I was on speakerphone. "You don't want to drag this through the mud, dear. Think of the family's reputation." "When?" The word was a shard of ice. "When did you know about them?" A long, damning silence hung in the air. The hesitation was the only confession I needed. "We've known for a while," Mom finally admitted. "Ethan confided in us, about 6 months before the accident." 6 months. The timeline crashed over me. They knew for 6 months. They watched me plan his funeral. They held my hand as I sobbed. They accepted my financial help every month, all while knowing their other daughter was carrying my husband's child. "Traitors," I whispered, the word cold and final. "All of you." I ended the call. My hands were shaking, but my actions were steady. I opened my banking app and cancelled the recurring $1,500 transfer. Let them ask their precious Jessica for money now. I blocked their numbers and Jessica's, and then I sank to the floor and let out a raw, animalistic scream that had been clawing its way up my throat for hours. 2 weeks passed in a self-imposed exile. Then came the email from an attorney's office. Jessica was making it official. The subject line was, "Pre-litigation settlement offer." It demanded I voluntarily sign over half of Ethan's estate to a trust for her unborn child. If I refused, she would sue. The word voluntarily felt like the cruelest joke in the world. The whispers at work became a dull roar. The pitying glances, the way conversations stopped when I entered a room. My boss, David Dowles, one of the few people I considered a true friend, called me into his office after I had a panic attack in the middle of a client presentation. "Chloe, take some time," he said, his expression full of genuine concern. "Take a leave of absence. Paid. Your job will be here when you're ready." I could only nod, my gratitude choked by unshed tears. I went home and became a hermit. Groceries were delivered. The doorbell went unanswered. I spent days sifting through old photo albums, my own personal detective, searching for a flicker of deceit in Ethan's eyes, a sign of the lie I'd been living. Every anniversary card, every lovingly inscribed "forever and always," now felt like a sick mockery. The news of the birth came, as all news seems to these days, via social media. Jessica had posted a photo from the hospital, looking beatific, my parents hovering over her like proud sentinels. The baby, a boy, was swaddled in the cream-colored blanket I had knitted. The caption read, "Welcome to the world, Ethan Jr." It was a deliberate, vicious jab. A week later, a process server handed me a thick manila envelope. I was being sued. Sarah Thompson versus Chloe Thompson. It laid out her claim in cold, brutal legalese. She wanted the house, half the money, and co-ownership of the Charlotte condo. After 3 days of frantic research, I hired a lawyer named Arthur Davies, a seasoned litigator with a reputation for being a shark in inheritance disputes. He listened to my story in his mahogany-paneled office, his face a careful mask of professional neutrality. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, his fingertips steepled as he reviewed the documents Jessica's lawyer had sent. "I have to be frank. Your sister has a very strong case. Text messages, photographs, witness statements from your own parents combined with a biological child. The courts are often very sympathetic in these matters." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. I was leaving his office, the weight of his words pressing down on me, when my phone rang. An unknown number. "Hello? Is this Chloe Thompson?" a woman's voice asked. It was elegant, measured, but there was an underlying tremor of emotion. "It is? Who is this?" "My name is Eleanor Vance," she said. "I'm Ethan's mother." The world went silent. I gripped the railing of the courthouse steps to steady myself. "That's impossible," I breathed. "Ethan was an orphan. His parents died in a fire when he was a boy." "That, I'm afraid," she said, her voice laced with a profound ancient bitterness, "was just one of my son's many stories. Would you be willing to meet me? There are some things you desperately need to know." We met the next morning at a quiet cafe downtown. She was waiting in a corner booth, and the moment I saw her, I knew. Ethan had her eyes a deep, startling blue, and the same wry curve to her lips. She was impossibly elegant, with a quiet strength that seemed at odds with her apparent age. "I was at the funeral," she said, after the waitress had left, "in the very back row. I wore a veil. I couldn't bring myself to approach you." Ethan and we hadn't spoken in almost 10 years. A memory surfaced, blurry and grief-soaked, of a solitary, well-dressed woman slipping out of the church before the service ended. At the time, I'd been too numb to wonder. "Why now?" I asked, my voice raw with suspicion. My capacity for trust had been obliterated. Eleanor reached into a classic leather handbag and pulled out a worn manila envelope. "Because I saw the birth announcement online. A friend sent it to me. And because despite the chasm between my son and me, I cannot stand by and watch his lies destroy another woman's life." Her hand trembled as she slid the envelope across the table. With shaking fingers, I opened the flap. Inside were official-looking medical records. Letterhead from Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, dated a decade ago, about a year before Ethan and I met. My eyes scanned the page, and the world seemed to drain of all its color. The clinical, damning words jumped out at me. Diagnosis: complete azoospermia. Non-obstructive. Prognosis: permanently sterile. Natural conception is not possible. Ethan had these tests done when he was 22, Eleanor explained softly, her gaze full of a sorrow that mirrored my own. He was devastated. It was the beginning of the end for us. He couldn't accept it, so he decided to rewrite his own reality. He told me he was moving away to start over, where no one knew his shame. He created the orphan story. It was easier than telling the truth. I couldn't speak. All those years, the invasive procedures, the hormone shots that made me feel like a stranger in my own skin, the monthly heartbreak, the crushing self-blame, it had all been a lie. A sick, cruel, elaborate lie. He had watched me torture myself, knowing all along that the problem wasn't me, it was him. The day of the hearing, the courtroom was a circus. Jessica sat in the front row, cradling baby Ethan Jr., a perfect portrait of the grieving, wronged woman. A parent sat behind her, her loyal bodyguards. When she took the stand, her performance was worthy of an Oscar. Tears glistened in her eyes as she wove a tale of a passionate secret love affair. "All I want," she declared, her voice cracking beautifully, "is for my son to have what is rightfully his. He deserves to benefit from his father's legacy." My lawyer, Mr. Davies, let her finish, his expression unreadable. Then he rose. "Your Honor, the defense would like to submit evidence that proves Ms. Thompson's entire claim is based on a foundation of fraud." He approached the bench with the Johns Hopkins medical records. The judge, a stern-faced woman named Judge Miller-Vey, read the documents, her expression hardening. Jessica's lawyer leaped to his feet, shouting objections about authenticity and chain of custody. "Those are fakes," Jessica shrieked from her seat, clutching the baby to her chest. "She forged them. She's trying to steal my baby's inheritance." "Your Honor," Mr. Davies continued, his voice calm and steady. "Given that these medical records show the late Mr. Thompson was sterile, the defense formally requests a court-ordered DNA test to establish paternity." Jessica's panicked expression melted away, replaced by a triumphant smirk. "That's impossible," she sneered. "Ethan was an orphan, and his body was cremated. There's no DNA to test against." Mr. Davies gave a slight, almost imperceptible smile. "Actually, Your Honor," he said, gesturing toward the back of the courtroom, "there is. I'd like to introduce Mrs. Eleanor Vance, Ethan Thompson's biological mother." Eleanor stood up gracefully. A shocked murmur swept through the room. From across the courtroom, I watched every last drop of color drain from Jessica's face. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. "I am willing to submit my DNA," Eleanor announced, her voice clear and strong, "to determine if this child is my grandson." Judge Miller's eyes narrowed on my sister. "DNA testing is so ordered," she declared, banging her gavel. "This court will reconvene when we have the results." Jessica looked like she was about to faint, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. 2 weeks later, we were back. The courtroom was deathly silent as Judge Miller held up a sealed envelope. Jessica sat stiff as a board, her knuckles white as she gripped her sleeping baby. "The results of the grandparentage DNA analysis are conclusive," the judge announced, her voice leaving no room for argument. "There is a 0% probability that Mrs. Eleanor Vance is the child's paternal grandmother. Therefore, it can be concluded with scientific certainty that the late Ethan Thompson was not the father of this child." A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. Jessica's face crumpled. She began to sob, ugly, gasping sobs that had none of the theatrical flair of her previous performances. "Miss Thompson," the judge said, her voice dangerously cold, "would you care to explain to this court why you chose to perpetrate this egregious fraud?" Through her hiccuping sobs, Jessica's confession tumbled out. I was seeing a few different men," she whimpered. "When Ethan died and he was cremated, I just thought no one would ever know. He had money, and I was scared." "So you attempted to defraud your own sister," the judge stated, her disgust palpable. "You manipulated your parents and lied under oath. You are fortunate, Miss Thompson, that Mrs. Thompson has not decided to press criminal charges." The ruling was swift. The case was dismissed with prejudice. Jessica's claim was dead. Outside on the courthouse steps, my parents rushed toward me, their faces etched with a desperation I'd never seen before. "Chloe, honey," my mother cried, reaching for my arm. "We had no idea. We swear we thought she was telling the truth. We can fix this. We've been struggling since you stopped the transfers." I held up my hand, and they fell silent. I looked at their faces, no longer seeing my parents, but two strangers who had been willing to sacrifice my well-being for their favorite child. Without a word, I pulled out my phone and, right there in front of them, deleted their contacts and blocked their numbers permanently. Then I turned and walked away. Eleanor was waiting for me by my car. "Are you all right?" she asked, her blue eyes full of concern. A strange sound escaped my lips. It was a laugh. A real, genuine laugh. "You know what? I think I am," I said, feeling a lightness I hadn't felt in a year. "Or at least, I'm going to be." I took a deep breath of the cool autumn air. "That condo in uptown Charlotte? Ethan left it to me, but I never liked it. Too many ghosts. But I've been thinking maybe you'd like it." Her eyes widened. "Chloe, no, I couldn't. Please," I insisted. "You gave me my life back. Let me give you a home." A week later, when I handed her the keys, she hugged me, tears streaming down her face. "I always wanted a daughter," she whispered. That was 3 months ago. My birth family still tries to get messages to me through cousins and old family friends, but I've built a wall they can't breach. Jessica sent one rambling handwritten letter full of excuses and pleas for help. I threw it in the fire, unopened. My family now consists of weekly dinners with Eleanor. We are slowly, carefully piecing together the man we both loved and lost, sharing the good memories, and confronting the painful truths. She's helping me understand that Ethan's deception doesn't have to erase every good moment we ever shared. Yesterday, Eleanor helped me finally pack away the last of Ethan's things. As we folded his sweaters and wrapped his favorite mugs in newspaper, she told me stories about him as a little boy, a bright, happy child before the lies took root. It helped, somehow, to know that version of him had existed. I'm not ready to even think about dating, but I'm living again. I'm back at work full-time. I've joined a hiking club that explores the Blue Ridge Mountains every weekend, and I just booked my first ever solo vacation 2 weeks in Italy. Sometimes I look in the mirror and I don't recognize the woman staring back. She's stronger, warier, but also freer than I ever thought possible. I lost the family I was born into, but I found a new one in the wreckage. This isn't the life I planned with Ethan all those years ago, but maybe, just maybe, it's the life I was always meant to have.